Dzień dobry, assalamu alaikum, ciao, konnichiwa, hola, bonjour, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, namaste. This is Ken at 10. How are you today? I hope you're well. Back in the studio today, hence you see the green screen behind me. I'm not actually in the middle of the England women's football team, although I would have liked to have been there last night. What a victory. They beat Latvia 20-0. Can you believe that? Makes you proud, doesn't it? Well done, ladies. 20-0 against Latvia yesterday, the England women's football team. Fantastic news. So how are you? Hope you're doing well. If you just come here for the first time, welcome. This is Ken at 10, because I'm Ken and it's 10. We're James Alexander Estate Agents and we broadcast daily about all things property from our offices in Norbury, southwest London, which is in southwest 16. To the north, we have Streatham. To the south, Croydon. We're smack bang in the middle of Zone 3 commuting area, which you should consider if you haven't already. We're actually in the process of working out a buy-to-let deal at the moment. Not deal, rather showing people, demonstrating how a buy-to-let deal can work for them. And we're going to do that in the podcast this week. And I hope you find that interesting, right from putting the deposit in, financing, what it's going to cost, what the yield will be, and the end result for the buyer. This one's already sold, but it's just sold. So it's a good example of a live situation that you or anybody else could have taken advantage of and actually found yourself the benefit of a really good deal. And they are out there at the moment, even though the market's busy and everything else. People think, it must be too expensive now. But no, it actually works here in London still if you buy right. But you've got to look at the numbers, Let's look at the headlines today. One that I saw was interesting in Landlord Today. More than half of landlords with properties rated in an EPC of D or below are considering selling because of the new energy efficiency rules on their way. This is new research from the Mortgage Works. And if you don't know, the Mortgage Works are a very, very big buy-to-let lender. And they say that 52% of impacted landlords have thought about selling some or all of their properties because they don't think they'll be able to either complete or finance the work to reach the required standard. Current legislation in England and Wales requires buy-to-let properties to have at least an EPC rating of E. However, to improve the energy efficiency, the government wants to increase the requirement to a C to all new tenancies created by 2025 and on. And for existing tenancies, that will be 2028. And residential properties account for around 20% of all UK carbon emissions. So you can see why the government have done it. It would result in a significant impact in carbon emissions. As a result of the TMW poll, more than 600 landlords, it highlights that those with larger portfolios are more likely to have considered some or all of their properties for sale, with 58% of those between 6 and 10 properties admitting they have done so, rising to nearly 2/3 of those with 20 or more rental properties. That's interesting. Landlords with just a few properties are least likely to have done so, with a third of just one property saying that they have considered selling still. More than a third of landlords with one property say it is rated between EPC D and G, meaning they will need to undertake retrofitting to hit the required standing. However, more than half say their property already meets the proposed standards. Those with 4 or 5 properties, so they have an average of around 2 properties that need work. This increases to 4 homes with those to 6 to 10 properties and 7 for those 11 to 19. When asked what improvements were needed, a third of landlords were in the dark. I think that's the problem, isn't it? A lot of people don't actually know what to do or how to go about it. For those that did know, 37% said they needed to fit traditional insulation, while a quarter needed to upgrade the boiler, with a similar number saying the work involved upgrading existing utilities. So it's interesting that putting more pressure on rental stock and more reason why we see rents increasing over the course of the next few years as these improvement standards bite and landlords decide to sell. And I think the closer we get to that deadline, unless there's some serious concessions, the more I can see some landlords, especially those with ratings of E, ending up deciding to sell rather than invest and make those improvements, because it would wipe out perhaps the profit for a considerable period of time. Now let's go into the headlines of the rest of the papers. The Daily Mail and the Daily Star reporting the average price of a home is expected to rise by, hold your breath, 5% by next year. And that's the average price of a home across Britain. And the most competitive housing markets currently are in Scotland, the West Midlands, the South West and Yorkshire, and the Humber. Rightmove said it expects these areas to see asking price growth at a higher rate, upwards of 7% next year. By contrast, asking prices in London are expected to increase by around 3%, says Tim Bannister. He said an imbalance of supply and demand has resulted in higher buyer demand per available property, and that's being at near record highs. So it's something we've been echoing for a while here now, suggesting the 2021 scenario of multiple buy bids on a higher proportion of properties when they come to market is set to continue in the new year. He added, we do, however, expect the pace of rises in 22 to be slower than 2021 due to increasingly stretched buyer affordability following this year's rapid rises in average prices. But we're also seeing inflation, and inflation for property investors, those already on the ladder, so to speak, they win in two ways. Number one, it actually decreases the value of your debt. So if the value of the pound in your pocket is worth less than it was, so the value of your debt is lower than it was. And it also is likely to increase your property prices. So in many respects, inflation is a win-win for investors. Of course, the flip side of that, and where investors can lose, is on interest rates. And although we do expect they'll go up in order to try and fight back against inflation, we think those rises will be relatively small compared with the wins in terms of rent rises and the erosion of the landlord debts. Interesting to see. International buyers are returning to London's prime market. The sale of luxury homes in London soared this autumn as the international elite returned to the capital's property market. The number of sales of properties worth more than 1 million was 56% higher than expected for October, new data reveals. This is analysis by Savills, and it says the total of homes worth more than 5 million exceeded 589 million. The total value, that is, of homes worth more than 5 million exceeded 589 million in October, which is 80% higher than in September and 29% higher than October 2020. Overall, there have been 398 sales worth more than 5 million across London in the year to October. Wow. Combined value, £4.1 billion. Who says there's no money out there? The interesting one as well from the Financial Times and the Daily Express. This is about CGT, capital gains tax. This has been a fear of landlords for a while now. And the Treasury has opted not to raise capital gains tax rates to align them with income tax. This is widely anticipated that the government were going to need to get money in the face of the pandemic. And one of the ways they would do this is to raise capital gains tax rates in line with income. And whilst they've also said that they're going to hold things as they are, their calls to lower the levies annual allowance. In respect, the recommendations for the Office for Tax Simplification, OTS, officials have rejected making any changes to inheritance tax. However, the government has accepted 5 recommendations on issues relating to capital gains tax in an effort to provide practical simplifications for taxpayers. One area officials are set to look into is CGT and couples who are separating. While currently transfers between spouses are only tax neutral in the year ahead of separation, the government has agreed that this should be extended. Well, this is very good news for landlords, and it's something that may have slipped under the radar, but many of us had an expectation, me included, that capital gains tax would actually be an issue this year, and we expected them to press for a greater increase in capital gains tax, particularly on the sale of property. So that's very good news and a bit of a relief if you're a landlord, especially if you're thinking of selling some of your portfolio, as many are in the light of the new energy performance regime requirements from 2025 onwards. Apart from that, affordable housing could be the next political battleground. Well, it always is, isn't it? But more than ever now. And this is an article saying that in 2019, the Conservatives flipped the constituencies known as the Red Wall. That's the historically safe Labour seats across the Midlands and north of England. Now, polling suggests that affordable social housing could be central to keeping them. A report from the Centre for Social Justice says these new Conservatives make up 70% of the population and contain a higher proportion of social renters than other segments of the population. In a poll of 5,000 adults, 2/3 of new Conservatives said social housing should be a government priority. Well, it never has been, really, has it? I mean, they've relied on the private sector for so long, and we're just not keeping up with the pace of that. So it'd be interesting to see how that pans out politically. And a project in Snowdonia. This is a bit of a confusing one for me. Snowdonia Home Help to Buy project has no successful applicants. I mean, either it's been under-promoted or they're not in a practical area where people want to buy. A housing project to help local people buy in Snowdonia has not had a single successful applicant since it was set up in 2015. Wow, what a waste. People must be working and have an income of between 16,000 and 45,000 and have local connections. The reason for the lack of interest is unclear, said the report. To date, there have been no successful applications. How strange. That was in London, maybe off the scale. It's strange indeed. Property owners are being paid to try and end the housing crisis. This is an article in BBC News and the London Evening Standard. And this is owners in Wales will be offered money to rent to homeless people to try and end the housing crisis. it's a soundbite. Come on, you're not going to. The idea that property owners are going to be bribed into it, there are many problems with this system, not least that the amount of money that they're trying to bribe them with is far less than the open market. And if you bought a home at open market value, renting it to the homeless is a great thing. But the problem is, if it doesn't cover your outgoings, it's impossible for you to do. Obviously, the benefit is that they'll be able to lease their properties to councils with long-term guaranteed rent and money to carry out improvements on the premises. They'll benefit from a long-term let between 5 and 20 years. And of course, the rent will be probably fixed during that period as well. So not only are they accepting a lower rent in the first place, the benefits of rental inflation will not be theirs for that period. But for a hands-off investment, if you want a passive income, might be something for you. York have trialled rough sleeper pods. These are a great idea. The Salvation Army is trialling pop-up rough sleepers accommodation in York, which includes technology to check if users have stopped breathing. That's an interesting idea and something a lot of cities could benefit from, the amount of homelessness we have here in London. The West End has started to rebound as well, which is good to see. Let's hope the Omicron variant doesn't put an end to that. Apart from that, it's a funny day today. When I was driving in this morning, it was kind of like really strange light in the sky, and it's currently a little chilly, but not too much. We are formally into winter now, and pinch punch, first day of the month, by the way. We're in December, and not long now, is there? Gosh, we are looking at 24 days to Christmas. Can you believe that? Are you ready? Who knows what's going on this year? We don't know what we'll be able to do and what we won't, do we? Hopefully, it will be less dramatic than we expect, and the variant will be less virulent than they currently expect. We'll know more within the next couple of weeks. Be interesting to see. But look, we've lived with it for this long. We can live with it for a little bit longer if we have to. Let's just get everyone vaccinated and boosted and hopefully get an end to this thing sooner rather than later. So thanks for watching. Have a fantastic day. We're back tomorrow with another edition. Until then, stay safe, look after your family and friends. Ciao.